Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Real Reds Talk. It is Thursday, which means it's match day, which means we have some juicy quotes from Salty Sofyan on Mr. Wilcox. We're going to dive into those. I'm going to discuss Amrabat's time at Manchester United and was it the right thing to let him go, and have a bit of a debate about that. Alvaro has opened up his future, or opened up about his United future, should I say. Should we bring him back? Obviously, we're looking for a left back at the moment. What kind of opportunities will we be looking at in the January transfer market? We had James on from the Upstairs last night who suggested that we're most likely going to go in for one. But who that could be, no idea. Maybe they will go back in for Alvaro because he's doing really well at Benfica at the moment. Mason Mount's injury continues. I want to open up about that myself because obviously I'm a fan of the player, but I think it's getting to a point now where you have to look at it and just consider it as an ultimate failure as a transfer. And maybe for me personally, it's taken a little bit of time to get around to that point and make it. But yeah, I'll discuss that. And then towards the end, obviously with the game being tonight, Fenerbahce versus Man United, we're going to do a Jose versus Erik ten Hag comparison because there weren't shots sent from either side, but I think Mourinho said his part in his press conference about, he feels like he was probably the most successful one, winning the Europa League, etc., etc. And then Erik goes on to say, yeah, we've both won trophies, but this and that and da-da-da. So what I've done is we have a comparison to break it down in terms of trophies won, actual wins, losses, draws, goals conceded, etc. But that is towards the end. So make sure you stick around. Make sure you come and join us. Make sure you stick around to the end, basically. Don't join us. Join us now and watch it. That's what I'm saying. Right, should we get into these Sofyan Amrabat comments then? Let's do it. So this is what he said. He got asked about his relationship with Erik ten Hag and his time at Manchester United. He said, I have a special relationship with Erik. He wanted to keep me this summer, so I wish him the best, but not for Thursday. I hope they lose. Cheers, Sofyan. The reasons for my departure, the only thing I want to say is that you have to ask Mr. Wilcox. So I think we've seen this now a couple of times with certain transfers. I think Scott McTominay was another one that ten Hag potentially didn't want to lose. He wanted to keep hold of, but for certain sales and other reasonings, they wanted to go and do that. Maybe the fact that we brought in Ugarte for 50 million quid, that kind of hindered Amrabat's transfer, because it's like, listen, it's either one or the other Erik. Erik probably wanted to keep him. It's a player that he trusts, it's a player that he knows, but he probably got, the alternative saying, do you want Amrabat or do you want Ugarte? There's more longevity in Ugarte. Brings more legs into the team, is what we definitely needed at the time. But I don't know. I thought, look, Amrabat, when he first came in, at left back against Palace, right? I think that was his first game. Obviously, in that position defensively, weren't great, but we was doing like a weird thing where we kind of had a back three, and sometimes he would drift centrally and he would kind of dictate. And he actually looked all right when he first came in. Some long balls, switching. It looked all right. And then I think there was like a period of games, maybe against like Burnley, Bayern Munich, I want to say Brentford potentially, Sheffield United was it as well, where he came in and he just looked sluggish. And I was saying myself personally, watching the game, because I think I was doing a watch along at the time, I was like, send him back to Italy. He's too slow. He can't adapt to the pace of the Premier League. He just doesn't look fitting at all. But having said that, I believe he didn't have a proper pre-season. He didn't get a continuous run of games. And then towards the back end of the season, I think against Arsenal, Brighton, Newcastle, he started to look really good. In that kind of six, because obviously Casemiro was having a fucking shit time, and the amount of mistakes he was making, people were starting to look at Sofyan like he was the alternative, right? And then we go into the FA Cup final. He starts that, and you're like, oh, okay. Now, granted, the way we set up was very pragmatic. It was very rigid, and that suits him a lot more. The way we want to play, does he fit into that necessarily? I'm not sure, which is why maybe Jason Wilcox also had the kind of veto on it and said, nah, don't see him working in this team. Don't see any longevity in it. We should bring in someone more like a Ugarte, who's a bit more promising. Maybe that was the thought process. I don't know. But we know Erik ten Hag wanted to keep him because that's literally come from the player's mouth. So ten Hag definitely wanted to keep him, but the board above said no. And maybe they made the right decision. Maybe they didn't. I'm not sure. But you can't blame us. Likewise with the manager, when we won the FA Cup final, a lot of them want to keep him on because you perform so well tactically. You got it spot on against the best team in the world, and I think you can mirror that comparison with Sofyan Amrabat, because when you watch him in the final, Paul Scholes, one of the greatest midfielders to ever grace the game and one of Man United's greatest players ever, compared him to Gattuso in that midfield. And that is high, high praise. And Scholes doesn't just throw out praise willy-nilly, you know what I mean? He's not one of those guys. He'll call it how it is. And he watched that performance, and he was like... And we all watched that performance. You know what I mean? Like, go back and watch it. If you look at his stats, it don't look that impressive. But on the eye, he did his job. And he was very integral to how we played in that game. So, naturally, when the game finished, everyone was like, I think we should sign him, you know? I think the majority, 75%, I want to say, would probably say we should have signed him. And they've not gone for it. So it's interesting, isn't it? Maybe that's the right thing not to be so knee-jerk. But they did the opposite with the manager, didn't they? They kept him after winning the FA Cup final. So I don't know at this rate. I'm just as confused as everybody else. But no doubt tonight, because it is match day, you know he's going to put in a worthy performance. You know Fred's going to play really, really well as well. You know there's going to be some form of shithousery from Jose. He's probably going to park the bus, make it frustrating, and make it a really difficult game, and the atmosphere is going to be popping off. So even if you're a neutral watching this game, which has pretty much been the case for United for the majority of the season, it's going to be an entertaining watching it. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. Make sure you join us for the pre-match build-up and the post-match review as always, guys, and smash a like on the video as well for us. Now, moving on to Alvaro Fernandes, who played with Benfica last night. I think they lost 3-1. I can't remember who he was playing. Pretty sure they lost 3-1. Don't quote me on that. Let me double check. But in terms of individually, he's been playing pretty well. And obviously, we put in a buyback clause for a reason, didn't we? Because we knew he had potential, but he's yet to unlock it. He had a couple of loan spells. Feyenoord, they lost 3-1 to Feyenoord, which is weird because Benfica have been blasting teams, I think, as of late. But yeah, they lost 3-1 to Feyenoord. I'm not sure Alvaro's performance individually because I didn't watch it. But in general, I believe he's been pretty good for Benfica as a left-back, and which has obviously alerted United a little bit because we're in a situation where we still don't have a fit left-back. Molassi's been in training on the grass for ages, but because he's been off for so long, they're not just going to chuck him straight into the fire pit. So it's one of those where we're going to have to just keep playing Leacher there or Dallo if Majrawi's fit tonight. So, yeah, obviously he's on their radar, and he got asked about, you know, returning to Manchester United, the potential of that, and he said, I only think about Benfica, I'm only focused here, I'll try to keep up the same level, try to help the team as much as possible, I'm just another player on the team. So, look, he's not shutting the door on it, but he's not really saying, like, yeah, I'd be happy to go back, I love that club, I have such an affinity, blah, blah, blah. And as a player, you probably have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, don't you, thinking, well, I wanted to succeed there. I thought I had the right ability. They didn't really believe that. They've sold me to another club. I've started to flourish, and now they want to bring me back. Maybe there's an element of that there. I'm not entirely sure. Me at the time, when I've watched Alvaro in very small kind of sample sizes, I didn't think he was very good defensively. I thought he was off it. And playing, as Eric Ten Hag said, playing in the Portuguese league in comparison to playing in the Premier League is night and day. Even listening to Jose Mourinho, who was talking about it, the Premier League, the levels it's a million miles ahead of the majority of leagues. So yes, he's flourishing for Benfica, but you know who are the best wingers he's coming up in that league? You know, is he coming up against your Sakas, your Salahs, Son Heung-mins, these kind of guys? He's not. The quality level, the intensity, the pressing is completely different. I'm not saying it's not a good league, the Portuguese league, but you know what I'm saying when you deep it. So if they want to bring back Alvaro, I think it'd be an interesting choice. I personally would rather go for a little bit more experienced, seasoned player who can do both sides of the game really, really well. I like Gutierrez. I like Alphonso Davies. I like Robinson from Fulham. I think they'll be the standard that we need to come in. Alvaro, I think, to bring him in, let's say, as your, kind of not number one signing, but your priority signing there, that's putting a lot of faith and trust in a kid to come in and do the job. So I think you need a bit of experience there. You know, Robinson's 26, 27, I think. So he's been around the block. He's been at Fulham for a good few years, and arguably performance-wise, he's one of the top performers in the league. So he is someone I would keep an eye on. I wouldn't personally go back in for Alvaro. I'm happy as I always am when a United player is doing successful at another club, but I just personally wouldn't bring him back. But let me know, guys. Chat, get in the comment section. It's very, very quiet in there. Even if you are watching this later on and not live. Now, a big piece of this show is going to be about Mason Mount, because anyone who's watched this channel for quite a while know I'm a fan of Mason Mount, and I've pushed back against everyone else who's saying shit signing, he's not worth it, and blah blah blah. And look, all the concerns that have been brought in alongside Mason Mount, I've agreed with. I've not dismissed. I get it. I still think he's a good player. However, we had news this morning and last night breaking again that Mount has had another injury setback and will be missing for longer than first initially planned. Again, Ten Hag spoke about it last night, saying, yep, it's a setback. You know, we expected him to be back already, but it won't be too long, which, again, we've heard before. I mean, he's been out since he got that cut in his head, and everyone thought, right, okay, he's going to miss this game, and he'll be fine, he'll be back. And then it's like, oh, no, actually, he had a calf. I think it was a calf injury or something. He's picking up all these little muscle ones. Look, I think first and foremost, when you look at the deal in isolation, paying £55 million on his final year contract on reflection, when Chelsea are eager to sell as well, not great, is it? It's not great at all. And then this has kind of been followed by 18 months of just no production, no fitness. It struggled to get any consistency at the moment. I believe, right, let me put this, let me just offer a scenario for you. If he wasn't injury prone, which is a big if, you could say the same about Luke Shaw and others, but if he wasn't injury prone, I genuinely believe he would be an integral cog in the system. I think he could offer so much and a lot. And we've already seen it at the start of the season, let's say, for example, what he can offer in terms of the press, his all-around game, his quick thinking. I think he's good at that. But the issue is, he's a jack of all trades, but he's a master of none, Mason Mount. And some people might not get what I mean by that. But he doesn't have a definitive quality where you can attach yourself to and you're like, that's what he's really good at. That's what we need. And you look at how Chelsea used the money when they bought Cole Palmer for £45 million. Imagine if we had done that deal instead of Mason Mount, where we would be at right now. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's a comparison, and we paid $10 million more for Mason Mount. Now, granted, at the time, more established player, England international, won a Champions League, etc. So when you're negotiating, it makes sense in terms of, like, in comparison to Palmer, because Pep wanted to sell Palmer, and Palmer wanted to move, and at the time he wasn't as established. But this is where your scouting comes in, right? This is where your due diligence comes in. I would have loved it if we signed someone like Cole Palmer for £45 million instead of Mason Mount, but we haven't, and that's the situation that we're in at the minute. Only 971 minutes played from Mason Mount, 11 games out of 65 with 1 goal, 1 assist, and 4 yellow cards. That's the stats that we're looking at with him at the moment. So, yeah, you have to look at it, and you have to say it's going to go down as another transfer, which in the past couple of years, we've had a few who not looked great. I mean, Casemiro for nearly 70 million quid. Not a good deal. Obviously, he was great the first year, but look what happened since. Mason Mount, 55 plus 5. And these are all Ten Hag signings, by the way. Not turned out to be a good deal. Anthony for 85 million quid. Probably going to end up sending him out on loan. So we have been doing this for a long, long time. When you look at it as a collective, we've been shitting money down the drain for ages. And bringing in players like this. And I know, look, it might change now. We'll look at the players that we brought in. It's different profile, a lot younger. Not necessarily the sparkly popular name, but yeah, look, we can't really make a judgment on the signings that have just come in this year. We need, a good few months under the belt before we can do that. But yeah, I think it's fair to say funds could have been spent, much better, and spent on a much more impactful signing and someone who isn't in Bruno's position, because Mount's best position is a number 10, and that's already occupied by Bruno Fernandes, which is United's most productive player. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and it may go down that Mount might rank as one of United's worst signings ever. And it's a shame, because I do think there is quality there, but that's where we're at the moment, guys. That is where we're at. But let me know your thoughts on Mason Mount. I know there's a lot of people who completely written him off. I haven't just yet. I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know how a player... I know we had... what was it? The pelvis injury, was it? Pelvic, something like that, when he was at Chelsea, and that wasn't necessarily a red flag. And then he comes in, and you're like, right, you got a calf, a muscle, just everything, like a game operation with him at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath with Mount, and giving him the number 7 shirt as well is another thing that I've not even mentioned. It's like, I definitely didn't agree with that at the time. I would have given it Garnacho or something. I think traditionally, when you look at number 7s at United, George Best, David Beckham, Eric Cantona, Cristiano Ronaldo, all like players with character, wingers, magicians. Mount doesn't fit in that category for me. So it just didn't really make sense. But anyway, let's move on the talk, because I have a comparison for you guys. Jose Mourinho versus Erik Ten Hag. 144 games versus 126 games. So the first stat that I say is going to be Mourinho. The second stat that I was going to say is Erik Ten Hag. 184, Ten Hag 172. Drawn 31, Ten Hag drew 19. Lost 29, Ten Hag lost 35. So literally, there's not a lot in between it in terms of a comparison. There's really not. Then you go to goals conceded. I think this is the most standout one. 129 goals conceded under Jose Mourinho. 177 conceded under Ten Hag. That's nearly 50 more goals in like 14 less games. That's a lot of goals. That's a lot of goals that we've conceded. And even this season, you look at the Tottenham game, you look at the Liverpool game. I think we conceded 3 against Porto as well, didn't we? Defensively, we have not been great under Ten Hag at all. Win rate, Jose Mourinho, 58%. Erik Ten Hag, 56%. Money spent, I think Jose spent around 400 million. Erik Ten Hag spent 600 million. And then trophies won 2 apiece. But obviously, Jose Mourinho won the Europa League, so that kind of trumps that. So in actual fact, when you actually do a comparison, I think you can still say at this moment in time, Jose Mourinho is still the most successful manager post Sir Alex Ferguson. And it always gets me asking the question, and I've asked Sam this as well on the channel. Had he had the right structure above him, do you think he would have been more successful? Do you think maybe he would have pushed for a Premier League title? You look at when he finished second, and the summer that we had after that, you get Dalot, Lee Grant, and Lindelof, was it, that he brought in? Is that pushing really for a title? Is that going to make, City kind of quiver in the... I don't think it is. So, yeah, I think Jose, we all remember it towards the end, how dark it got and how gloomy it got and how the players were. I mean, his relationships with Luke Shaw and Paul Pogba, and maybe his man management at times was a little bit too old school and people couldn't really, you needed to tweak it slightly. I'm not sure, because you look at his... Now, he's still gone to places and won things. He got to a final with Tottenham but got sacked before it. Won the Conference League with Roma, which was mega for them, and then gone to Fenerbahce. I think it's currently sitting 4th in the league for Fenerbahce. But, yeah, I don't know. I like Jose. I think his box office. I think maybe for the modern game now, I don't think he's pivoted enough for me personally to still be that top level manager. But the experience that he's got and the trophies that he's won, he's still one of the greatest managers of all time. So you can never count him out. And I think tonight, when United play him, which we're going to be live for, pre-match build-up and post-match review, please do come and join us, because usually we have early team news. I think it's going to be interesting how he sets up, how he tries frustrating Ten Hag and the players. And he knows the character of some of these players. His quotes still hold weight to this day. When he was speaking basically about Anthony Martial and Marcus Rashford, saying there are still players there to this day that shouldn't be at the club. And that's because of the inconsistencies, the character that he wants specifically from players. I mean, if you look at his Inter Milan team when they won the treble, he had players on that pitch who would genuinely die for him. You look at the game against Barcelona. Was it Thiago Motta? I can't remember who got sent off. They had 10 men. I mean, those players done everything they possibly could for that manager. And they're the kind of players that he wants. When you want to win things, you want winners in a team. And I don't think United have them in abundance, especially when Jose was there. So, yeah, I think he's experienced, a very wise man. I think he knows what he's talking about, obviously, in the game. But I just think he's got a little bit dinosaur-y in this kind of modern day and age. But who knows? He could absolutely slap Man United tonight, and we're all sat here saying, wow. But I think Fenerbahce have got some good players, man. I think it's going to be tricky. I didn't realise he had Saint Maximum, who absolutely destroyed Dalot in the Carabao Cup final. He could be an absolute problem. Obviously, they've got Amrabat and the Fred narrative there, which is interesting as well. They've got Dusan Tadic, who Ten Hag's worked with before, but I think he's getting on. He's must be 35 now, at least, minimum. Edin Dzeko, Man City, old rival. You've got a couple of stories there, to be fair. Stefan's in the chat saying sack Ten Hag. Don't know who that is. Must be a different manager. Mark Palmer, would you take Ollie back? Absolutely not. No, I wouldn't. I think once you've had a manager, going back to him. I know Chelsea did it with Jose, but I thought there was a lot more reasoning for that at the time. Bringing Ollie back, I think it's a fan theory kind of thing. Afternoon, Nick. You didn't ask about Miss Piggy last night. Very disappointed. That's because, Richard, you've put it in before and we've asked him about it. So it's a bit, when we've got a guest on, I don't want to keep asking him every show, what about Miss Piggy? You know what I mean? It's a bit like, we want to talk about football, to be fair. But any questions you've got, I'll always ask. I've got no problem with that. I just thought it's a bit, yeah. It kind of broke up the conversation when we're talking about football and then going, what do you think about Miss Piggy, mate? They'd be like, do you know what I'm saying? So nothing on your question. It's just, I just didn't want to break up the flow of the conversation that we was having at the time. And that is in relation to the interview that we did with James from Uppertiers last night. Got some good information on Ineos, on Xavi as a manager, on certain targets in January, on the left-back situation, on the Tuchel situation. Loads and loads of information on there, so please do go and check that out. But yeah, apart from that, guys, I shall leave it at that. Very quiet show today. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm missing everyone. So if you are watching this later on, hello. But thank you for tuning in. Smash like in the video.